Beginning a new rig with the RHiggit Body Builder is very simple. Click the Body Builder button and you will be presented with the Make New Rig dialog. Here you can enter a character namespace and select the style of rig you wish to create. Once you've made your selections, click OK and you will be presented with the main Body Builder interface. There are two ways for getting your mesh onto the rig that you wish to use. The first is as I've shown here, just going with an empty scene. The initial rig will be created with a null titled Replace with Mesh, and you can simply use the Replace with Object to swap out this null for the mesh that you wish to rig. The other way is to begin with a mesh ready loaded in the scene, have it selected, once again start the Body Builder, and when you click OK, this mesh will now be assigned to your rig, as you see here in the scene editor. From this point you can commence building your rig, either using one of the rig presets here, or go to work building it yourself out of the different parts. Before you do either, you ideally want to set the initial scale of your rig. As such, grab the rig root marker and scale or position it to get the main root marker here. We can see that easily in wireframe, in the position where you would want your main root to be. In the case of a biped like this, that would represent the hips root. You do not have to do this by scaling the rig root marker. You could of course grab this marker and position it where you desire, but the scale of the main rig root marker will affect the size of the shapes that are generated. For instance, let me just add a single leg here. We can see with the leg added, I have the null controllers there, which are come in by default at a given size. If my rig root marker were larger, so let's scale it up like this, and I'll add another leg now, then we can see that the shapes created for this second leg are larger. RHiggit will not automatically resize the shapes for things as you go along, nor change them. It will only create them of a fixed shape, of a fixed size at the initial point of creation. By scaling your rig root to roughly match the size of your character mesh, you will oftentimes get the shapes that are about the right size for the character that you're working on. From this point, as you work, you are free to start changing shapes and colours and sizes. RHiggit will not interfere with any of that for you. Quick way to do this is via the rigging toolbox, where you can select either a single marker or multiple markers together, and you can quickly switch their shape to whatever kind you like, change their sizes thusly. And you can do this both for the rig controls that are generated, and if you desire, you can also start changing the markers themselves, if you prefer a different appearance for those. As you build your rig, click the Rig Fit button to switch back and forth between rig mode and fitting mode like this, which you can do endlessly, refitting and adjusting your character to shape and nudge the rig about as is necessary. Also notice that whilst in fitting mode, you have these quick visibility toggles for hiding either the markers themselves, the bones, which are the bones which deform the character. The only bones shown during fitting mode are those which will affect the mesh, and the plane items there. As such, working like this, toggling your visibilities and your shapes makes it nice and easy to get the setup into your character, being able to see what you're doing and which parts are located where. Notice also that the Body Builder has certain keyboard shortcuts associated with it. Ordinarily, for instance, if I've made a viewport selection here, so my viewport is active, you can use the up-down arrow keys to cycle through items, and of course the left-right keys will take you through different frames on the timeline there. Ordinarily, with non-modal tools like the Body Builder panel here, let's say for instance the scene editor, if my scene editor is active and selected, then the up-down arrow keys are now scrolling my scene editor. It is not cycling through my selection. Since it can be a little bit annoying to be working with the Body Builder, having this panel active and having to constantly switch back to activate viewport to get these controls, keyboard shortcuts have been mirrored on the Body Builder panel. As such, with the panel active, you can still push the up and down arrow keys, which will cycle you through next item, previous item. Left and right arrow keys, however, will not cycle frames, since of course when fitting we always want to be on frame 0. Rather, left and right will go through sibling items like this. As we can see here in Scene Editor, the main root marker, the leg root marker and the other leg root marker are all siblings of each other. Thus, the keyboard shortcuts will cycle you between those. And similarly, if I were here on the knee, then the Body Builder shortcuts would cycle me between those items. Do of course be careful if you get too used to this way of working, because the keyboard shortcut is different. What you do not want to be doing is to wind up in a situation where you have your viewport active and you're accidentally going through different frames. Otherwise, in addition to this, with the Body Builder panel active, you can still use keyboard shortcuts like T and Y and spacebar to switch between the different move, rotate and scale tools. Do notice that when either creating presets, adding parts or switching between rig and fit modes, RHiggit will be doing its magic in the background, and you will see messages down here at the bottom to let you know what is going on. For simple rigs with only a few parts, this is very quick just to switch between modes. For more complex rigs with a lot more parts, it can take a few seconds to complete a switch in or out of one mode or the other, and also can take a good few seconds for building a preset. RHiggit will always inform you when it is done by saying that it is either rig on or is in fitting mode. And you can also notice the little selection number down here, which will be rattling away whilst RHiggit is working its little magic.